Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. And we are very many on this webinar, so it's quite a pleasure for me to be here today to welcome you. The theme of this webinar is strengthening national governance to accelerate food systems transformation. We, the SAC, the Scientific Advisory Committee to the UN Food Systems Coordination Hub, have put this series of webinars together, and this is one in the series. We're extremely happy to be holding this now, in particular as we all prepare for the UN FFS +4 stocktake. Let me call on Dr. Stefanos Fotou, the director of the UN Food Systems Coordination Hub. He and his team are very much engaged with the UN Food Systems +4 stocktake preparations, and we, the SAC, also are the advisors to the UN Food Systems Coordination Hub. So Stefanos, let me call on you to give some welcoming remarks.
Thank you very much, Sakundala. And indeed, let me reinforce that the SAC is an institutional advisor of the hub. And I would like to congratulate you and your colleagues, as well as all the SAC members, for the work that you have done. And we believe that the different events, the webinars, but also the policy briefs that you're preparing for the UNFSS +4 is going to be a very important input. So the topic of governance is extremely critical, and of course, it's extremely timely. I tried to find definitions of governance, and I came across at least a dozen, Sakundala. So I've done one which is a mix of a UN definition with some Investopedia's definition. And governance, they say that it's the system, values, institutions, policies, and processes that guide decision-making and implementation. But I would say that this is governance as a theoretical item. But actually what we need is inclusive governance and good governance. And good governance is the one that requires to embrace a number of items, to embrace transparency, participation, accountability, that they can align diverse interests. Of course, since we talk about food systems across agriculture, health, environment, trade, and other areas. And governance is not just a background factor in the food systems. I think it is the foundation which, excuse me, we can build sustainable, equitable, and resilient food systems. Excuse me, I need to clear my throat. So what's happening is that today governance must correspond to an increasingly complex, interconnected environment of challenges in the food systems. We have a number of studies, a lot of them coming from the scientists, from the SAC, and also global assessments from FAO, from other UN agencies, that they say that the food systems are not only failing to deliver their core, which is nutrition and healthy diets, but are also driving environmental degradation, social inequalities. So we need to address this complexity. And there are some key issues, like the policy fragmentation across agriculture, health, trade, environment, the lack of accountability, the exclusion of marginalized voices, and the weak enforcement mechanism that I think they need to be addressed under a framework of good governance. It is important to have multi-stakeholder engagement, but this engagement not to be symbolic. It doesn't mean that because we invite people in tables, we have done our duty. Governance process must give actually the academia, the civil society, the producers, and the consumers a real influence over this decision. So I hope that today, I'm sure that we will explore how countries and actors can move from siloed decision-making to systems taking supported by effective governance that is rooted in science, justice, and collaboration. It's extremely important to have research-based evidence that it drives any decision and implementation. So thank you very much, and looking forward to this.
Thank you so much, Stefanos. And please note, in the title, we have said national governance. Of course, governance is at many levels, but we do want to strengthen national governance as we move forward with the UN Food Systems +4 and up to 2030 with the Sustainable Development Goals, because we all know and we all have seen that national ownership and national engagement are crucial for governance and are crucial for accelerating the food systems transformation. So now I'd like to introduce you to our speakers. And I would like to begin by introducing Dr. Shenggen Fan, who is a co-chair of the SAC, and he has been leading this theme on which we are holding the seminar, the webinar, Strengthening National Governance to Accelerate Food System Transformation. Dr. Shenggen Fan is Chair, Professor, and Dean of Academy of Global Food Economics and Policy. Our next panelist is Dr. Karina Hawkes. Karina, welcome. Karina is the Director of the Division of Agri-Food Systems and Food Safety at FAO. Then our third panelist is Dr. Dow. Dr. Dow is the Vice President of Vietnamese Academy of Agricultural Sciences and the National Convener of Vietnam. Our fourth panelist is Dr. Usman Bidean, who has also worked closely with Shenggen Fan, and he is a distinguished fellow of the African Association of Agricultural Economists and was the recipient of the African World Food Prize in 2015. So with these panelists, we look forward to hear their views and hear their and to hear how they view our theme. And as we move forward, we will then engage with the participants who are here today, all of you. So please listen carefully and write your notes and also write your comments and questions, which we do hope that we'll have time to address. Shenggen, I start with you.
Well, thank you, Shakantana. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, everybody. I think Stefano gave a very good introduction. What is governance? What is the process of governance? Shakantana emphasized the national governance. Indeed, so my presentation, very brief presentation, is going to focus on the national governance. So how can we strengthen the national governance to accelerate the food system transformation? So why national governance? And we know that at national level, the country develops national strategies, national vision with regard to food security, agricultural development, rural development, and so on. So the national government is very key in designing national strategy for transforming the food systems. Then obviously there are many other national strategies and visions. I think the food system strategy and vision will be able to bring all this together to use food system to deliver the national development goals, for example, SDGs and beyond. Now, the national government also play a very critical role in coordinating all the ministries. Typically, there are Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development, Ministry of Health, Ministry of Climate Change or Environment, Ministry of Finance, and so on. So it is a national government that has ability and responsibility to coordinate all these ministries together. Now, the national government has the responsibility in allocating public resources. Public resources are very limited. Usually they're generated through taxing or through fees. So the question is how does the government allocate that resources for achieving the national goals, particularly in the areas of food and nutrition security goals, of course, natural resource management, climate change, and so on. Then the national government has a legal obligation to protect everybody in the country, smallholders, fishers, foresters, farmers, and so on, and obviously poor consumers. So I think it's it is a fundamental human rights that everybody should have access to healthy and nutritious foods. It is great that many countries, including many African countries, that have already included food, that's access to food as a basic human rights in their legislation, in their laws, in their regulation. And of course, finally, the national government is also a convener of stakeholders and rights holders. So the rights holders. So it's not just the stakeholders, it's the smallholders, the private sector, the NGOs, and so on. They also hold certain rights. So it's both stakeholders and the rights holders. Now, what are the key recommendations? So number one is to use a system approach to governance. As I already mentioned, there are many ministries that are working on food and nutrition security, on climate change, and natural resource degradation, and so on. So it is still the case that these ministries do not work together. They work in silo. Sometimes actually they work against each other. So for example, some countries introduce very tough, very rigorous laws in protecting natural resources. If we let tight natural resources too hard, the food and nutrition security may suffer. However, there are win-win opportunities to bring natural resources protection and the food and nutrition together. Now, here in my own country, China is working on that. In Vietnam, the government has merged two ministries, Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development and the Ministry of Natural Resources and the Environment. So in this case, at least food and nutrition security and yet natural resource degradation will work to support each other. But obviously, there are many sort of opportunities to bring even nutrition and finance, climate change together. Okay, if it's not possible to merge ministries, at least there should be a national coordination mechanism that can coordinate all the actors, all the activities, all the segments related to food systems. So here, I'll give you another example, Rwanda. So Rwanda has created interministerial clusters, so the prime minister or even the president can jointly assess the progress using the joint performance contracts across different ministries. The Rwanda signs contracts with the top government until to everybody in the village. And then sector-specific working groups, agriculture, nutrition, and health, sector-specific, but towards the end of the day, all these groups have to work together under the coordination of the Prime Minister's office or President's office. Then adopt a fundamental rights framework, as already mentioned. So it is a fundamental human rights for everybody to access to nutritious and healthy foods. It is also a fundamental human rights that we protect the environment to make sure that we can live in a friendly environment where we can continue to be productive, health. And obviously, indigenous populations' rights are particularly important, including their knowledge. So not just rights, their knowledge. Not indigenous knowledge can be shared more broadly with science community. Rights to nature, I have already mentioned, yes. So access to sort of natural resources, water, land, even certain, let's say, biodiversity resources are basic human rights. Then the policy integration. So we need a policy to integrate all these rights together. Of course, let's make sure that we also use the market mechanisms to create incentives for all stakeholders to work together. So the rights and the market work together. And to make sure that, yes, we have social justice, ecological sustainability, inclusion of marginal population, marginal communities. Then outcome-driven governance. So all this have to be related to the KPI, key performance indicators of the government and relevant stakeholders. The number 3 is to empower local governments. We know that as urbanization continue to accelerate, many poor and hungry people have also been urbanized. And the consumers, the food consumers have been urbanized. Like in China, in many sort of emerging economies, more than half of the population live in urban centers. They are key food like stakeholders with their consumers. They needed to access to healthy, nutritious foods. In the meantime, they also wanted to protect the natural resources. So in the past, we have very much ignored urban communities. We must empower its urban governments. So there are some initiatives, for example, C40, the big 40 cities in the world are working together to drive this food system transformation, including introduce it's a food procurement policy to make sure that hospitals, schools, universities, they can procure healthy, nutritious, sustainable foods. And equally important is the local governments in rural areas. They also need to be empowered, use certain technology to track, monitor the food system transformation at a local level. And the citizens must be empowered to make sure that their community leaders are responsible, accountable to many key indicators in the food system transformation. So I have already seen that in many countries, the local citizens use social media to report the certain pollution or certain public health issues, food safety issues, to the website, through the social media. So the whole society, whole community will be aware of some of the challenges related to food systems. Then strengthen the institutional capacity. Yes, I think the food system transformation needs capacity support. Agriculture lacks capacity. Rural development lacks capacity. And the food system transformation lacks capacity in particular. So here, it's not just individual capacity. Equally important is institutional capacity. That's the community, the network, the civil societies in the community or in the whole society. So how do we use a system approach? How do we use a forward-looking approach to make the informed decision? Here, I want to emphasize this, a couple of things. One is science policy interface. Yes, we still generate natural knowledge information data, but they have not been communicated to every citizen. So that link is particularly weak. So as part of the capacity strengthening, we need to make sure that the link is strong, can be strengthened. And the other thing I wanted to emphasize the role of innovation. The innovation, it's not the innovation in science and technology, but also innovations in social enterprises, in social practices, and more at a local level. So that sort of innovation can help to drive the food system transformation. The number 5 recommendation is to enhance data and evidence-based decision-making. So make sure that we use data, we use information, research-based evidence to support decision-making at the national level, at the sub-national level, community level. And here, once again, I wanted to emphasize the modern tools, like social media, internet platform can help to use the data, to use information, to inform decision makers. And here, obviously, the data will be so critical. I think here using AI, using all these technologies will help to enhance data and evidence. Then leverage financial and economic instruments. Yes, we need finance to support food system transformation. Well, this is the area we're going to discuss in UNFSS +4, so financing. It's not just, I do think there are finances available, financial resources available. So for example, every year we spend $600 to $700 billion in subsidizing fertilizers, water, electricity. We know that most of these subsidies are not sustainable. They do not produce healthy, nutritious foods. They do not benefit smallholders. Sometimes they even do not benefit poor consumers. So why don't we just repurpose these subsidies for the use, let's say, by the national government to build rural infrastructure to support agricultural research and development, to support the production of healthy and nutritious foods through value chain development. Now, right now we know that many countries, many rich countries begin to move away from foreign aid to support developing countries. So we have the South-South cooperation, India, Brazil, China, South Africa. So their knowledge, their data, or even their financial resources could be shared with less developed countries. So through South-South cooperation can help to address some of the financial issues we're facing right now. So finally, it is urgent than ever to address the key role of the national governance in food system transformation. We know that we have had lots of global debates, UN, FSS, and SDGs debate and so on. We must move from global debate to national level actions. And national level actions, among these actions, the strengthening national governance is so critical. I'll stop over. Thank you, Shenggen Fan.
Thank you so much, Shenggen, for your comprehensive overview. I really enjoyed listening to you and listening to the inclusion of the right to food, the ministerial collaboration that's necessary, the importance of local governance, financing, and not least South-South partnership. Thank you so much. I will now move over to Dr. Karina Hawkes, who is the Director of the Division of Agri-Food Systems and Food Safety, FAO. Karina.
Thank you. Thanks, Shakuntala, and thanks, Shenggen, for that excellent overview. Can I just make sure you can hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Great. Well, thank you, and thanks very much for inviting me to speak for a few minutes. I wanted to pick up on the point that Shenggen was making about taking a systems approach. At FAO, we've been asking ourselves what this means in practice. And actually, in a couple of weeks' time, on July the 22nd, we have a publication coming out clarifying what a systems approach involves in practice across agri-food systems, as we say, explaining what it means, why it matters, and how to adopt it. And not surprisingly, one of the 6 elements that we have identified as core practices of a systems approach is systems governance, along with some of the other elements that Shenggen also mentioned, systems thinking, systems knowledge, systems learning, and systems doing are the other 5 elements that we will be talking about in the framework. And what have we learned then on the systems governance side? That the work that we've done about systems governance in the context is in context of how systems actually work. And Shenggen has gone over some practical examples and details of how to make this happen in practice, as have we been also looking at existing examples. And we know that it's vital because of the diversity of people and institutions involved in agri-food systems, each of which with different perspectives, levels of power and responsibilities. And what we found from exploring what was going on at the national level was 3 things. First of all, is on leadership. Now, we know that we need to have leadership, and that's part of governance. But what's most important of all is that that leadership is distributed approach to leadership. The system is so complex, agri-food system is so complex, it's not like you can have one leader who's going to control and coordinate. That's just not possible in the complexity of the system. You need to have agency and power all the way across the system, with people identifying themselves as leaders of change. So that distributed approach to leadership, in which the broad range of people involved take action in a decentralized manner is vital. But that also means, and Shenggen mentioned this, you need to have that shared vision, because everyone needs to come behind that vision. So we identified 3 elements that are needed, 3 practices, 3 key shifts that need to happen to implement this more systems approach to governance. And the first one is establishing the leadership mechanism. That is not a command and control body that can control and coordinate everything, but it is the mechanism that is needed to enable cross-sector decision-making, to tackle shared challenges, precisely because keeping people aligned towards that vision is so critical. So it's about bringing power to that vision and bringing commitment to that vision, while letting the leadership lead across the whole system in this more distributed way. The second practice that we identified as being critical was joint planning. Again, there's a big emphasis on a plan, a strategy. That's necessary and it's needed. But the real power comes in joint planning processes, because that's when the different parts of the system, the different people across agri-food systems come together and actually exchange with each other and understand each other's perspectives and how each one can help each other to deliver to a shared set of goals, again, emphasizing the importance of shared vision. And it's a way of avoiding working at cross purposes and duplication of efforts and missing opportunities for synergy. Then the third practice we identified as being critical was dealing with power dynamics. Again, very important in governance. We know that imbalances in power can block progress towards better outcomes. We know also that whenever you take an action in agri-food systems, some kind of trade-off will be involved. And that if the voices of those who are most likely to be affected negatively by those trade-offs are not part of that decision-making, or are not involved in that decision-making, or at least shaping it, that we will end up not only with an unsustainable food system, but with an even more inequitable food system. So that's why we've identified these practices as core, and they reflect very well on what Shenggen has already shared with us, establishing leadership mechanisms that give agency to distributed leadership towards a vision, conducting joint planning and design processes, and strengthening inclusive governance arrangements. And we've also found that countries are already undertaking these processes. Again, as Shenggen shared, there's many countries and that have not only started to develop, but in some cases have pretty well developed institutionalized cross-government bodies, advisory councils and commissions, as well as forms of multi-stakeholder collaboration. We're seeing increasing amount of joint planning processes, whether it's in Mexico, Rwanda or Switzerland, in order to develop these shared plans. And when it comes to the managing power imbalance, the development of broad coalitions, such as we saw in Mexico over the development of the law on the right to food, also support for women's-led groups mandating inclusion of Indigenous peoples. The mechanisms exist for making these changes. But so what we want to do from FAO's side is to make sure that the importance of governance and the importance of active support for governance, often it's seen as an afterthought. We need to get things done. We need to make sure we're supporting action on the ground, absolutely critical. But if you don't have this governance behind it, then it's more likely that the action will not achieve the multiple outcomes we know the food systems can deliver, that it will be working at cross purposes, that it will be inequitable. So our messaging is really, it's absolutely critical to support governance, which is work that we do at country level, but count on us to support strong messaging of the importance of governance with a systems approach. I'll end there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Karina. And it was really good to hear you talk about the food systems approach. And even though you have told us how difficult it is and how difficult it can be and how many have to get together behind this, then you have also given us some very good examples of the principles that we should be using to make sure we all get there. Thank you so much. The next panelist I want to call on is Dr. Dow. And Dr. Dow comes from Vietnam. And this is one of the countries where we have seen some of the principles that Karina has mentioned in play. So please, Dr. Dow, let us hear from you and about the examples from Vietnam.
Thank you, Shakuntala, and thank you, Dr. Shenggen Fan, to introduce the principle of and the necessity of the national governance in the food system. So I would like to share the experience from Vietnam. For those days in Vietnam, we are restructuring the ministerial system. So as Shenggen already mentioned, that we merged Minister of Agriculture and Minister of Environment and Natural Resources into one in order to the objective is also to improve the the efficiency of the governance system. In the case of Vietnam, for the food system, you know that we are the country that we export a lot of agricultural product and contributing to world food securities. But the challenge is that we still face the challenge of nutrition, with trip burden nutrition, and also the question of very high expenditure of the environmental costs for the agricultural production due to the intensive system. So we understand that in order to respond to the multiple outcome of the food system with food security, nutrition securities, also the high pressure on the growth rate of agricultural sector, the question of environmental and then low green agriculture. So we need the multi-sectorial partnership. So we in Vietnam that's why we in Vietnam we think that the conception of co-leadership is important. Not only one ministry can respond to the food system challenge. So for the food system negotiation consultation, we identified 3 national food system convener. So one for Minister of Agriculture, one for Minister of Health, and the third one is for international cooperation in order to coordinate between the government and the international organization. So the food system partnership, the food system transformation plan is issued by Prime Minister in order to coordinate across ministry. So we also reviewing the different activities under the food system, and we try to keep the balance between the agroecological transition for the production part in order to achieve the sustainable production, and also healthy diet access for the sustainable consumption. And I think that we fully agree that the role of science technology is important for the coordination and governance. So we already now created a food system partnership. I think that this is a kind of innovation in Vietnam in order to keep the continuous science policy dialogue for the food system. And also this kind of activities also can support the government to build a system of monitoring and evaluation, ME, to see the transparency of the food system transformation. So here we talk about the necessity for the national governance, but also we in order to make the food system transformation action happen, the capacity building for the local people with the systemic approach and bring the methodology for the local governance is very important. So in Vietnam, we think that the provincial level is the level that they can have the decision on the food system transformation in the action, and we start to bring to develop the methodology and training capacity building for the provincial system in the food system. So helping them to establish multi-sectorial task force with the participants from different agencies, agriculture, environment, health, trade, etc., in order to try to coordinate and to optimize the use of different natural financial resources in order to realize the food system transformation at the local level. And we also think that in the context that now the financial resources for food system transformation is very limited, and we try to also optimize is support from different international organizations like the CGIAR research system, so in particularly the Alliance Biodiversity NCR or CIRAD from France and other countries. So under the food system transformation partnership, we create the 5 working group that this is a place that different international organization, research, university, and NGO can also contribute the initiative in order to support the national governance to develop the methodology. And I think that the last point, I fully agree with Shenggen, that in order to mobilize the private sector, the governance between the national at different level with the private sector is very important. So the communication and strategy, strategy communication is important, and we cooperate with the media closely in order to produce a media campaign in order to change the society behaviors. So I think that with this kind of integrated approach, we think that national food system transformation in Vietnam, we can achieve some results, positive results at 2030. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dow. And I do hope that some of these examples you have given us, especially of the actions that are being taken at local level, will be presented at the UNFFS +4 stock take so that other countries can learn from the examples of Vietnam. Thank you. Our next panelist is Dr. Usman Badian. Usman is the executive chairperson of the Academy A 2063. Usman, we look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you very much, Shekantula, and thank you to everybody who's spoken before me. I noted from Shenggen's presentation the importance of holistic strategic plans, the need for quantifiable phased goals, as well as the need to coordinate interests of multiple parties. Karina talked about the importance of distributed leadership, joint planning, and inclusivity. All those things that are reflected in Africa's journey in terms of food system governance. And what is interesting here, what we haven't heard actually, is in a world of interrelated economies and food systems, regional and global cooperation is extremely important. Shenggen mentioned a little bit about the South-South cooperation. So the innovation here in the African context has a lot to do with regional coordination, but also those 3 aspects mentioned by Shenggen, as well as the principles mentioned by Karina Hawkes. Those have observed the Comprehensive Africa Agriculture Development Program, which was launched back in 2003, may not have noticed what that was in terms of innovations if they joined the trend just over the last 20 years or so. But to take you back a little bit, before CADEB was launched 20 years ago, the Ag Food System Agenda, or then what was called the Agricultural Agenda, often was triggered or originated from a major paper by UNDP or the World Bank or by FAO or an international conference. And because those topics were changing very often and frequently, you found African countries following strategies, governance systems that were changing regularly. So there was not the continuity and the consistency that will allow a country to tackle long-term problems, which requires staying power, intentionality, but also long-term effort to change the conditions of living, but also the performance of these economies. That has changed profoundly with the launch of the Comprehensive Africa Agriculture Development Program, which was launched, developed, and adopted at the continental level, all 50 plus African countries. with shared frameworks in terms of then agriculture-led, and in the last iteration, which is the third decade of CAADP, agri-food system anchored development principles, including evidence-based planning and policy implementation. We talked about that, but also principles including mutual accountability. Again, we talked about inclusivity and others here. That started 2 decades ago. Shenggen talked about importance of shared quantifiable goals. Here across the continent, formally approved at the heads of state level for 50 plus countries, you have goals that are shared across these different countries and that countries are trying to achieve. In the first decade of the CAADP agenda, it was quite simple, achieving 60% to growth and allocating 10% of government budget invested in agriculture. In the second decade, it was expanded to include equality, gender, youth, climate smart agriculture, and the like. In the third iteration that's taking place, that's really important while we talk about food system here. The heads of state just in January adopted the third decade of the Kampala agenda, which is very much aligned with the food system approach, has unpacked the Malabo agenda for those who have been following it to address the issues more squarely of mitigation and adaptation, the issues of food safety, the issues of equality, integrity, all the different things that were being subsumed under the Malabo agenda have been taken to the fore. Nutrition has been unpacked to go beyond just measuring malnutrition. So this is undernutrition. So these things have been help improve the CAADP. But the biggest area of innovation really across the African continent is in the area of mutual accountability. If you have been a follower of African policy-making landscape before the advent of CAADP, reviews processes included a bilateral portfolio review, let's say between country A and a donor X. In January, in March, you have the same review between country A and a bilateral organization. In May, you have the same thing between country A and a multilateral organization, parcellated. And at some point, you'll have the cabinet receiving a memo from the Minister of Agriculture reporting on its business. That has changed with the joint sector review processes, which are robust, comprehensive, and inclusive, and take place at one time when everybody is around the table. The top of the innovation is the binary review process, which has been launched in 2015, which every 2 years produces a scorecard and help countries at the heads of state level know what's happening, and it trickles down to the lowest levels in every country. So my 5 minutes are up. I'll stop here and look forward to questions to expand on these important innovations that I think are unique across the globe. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Usman, and thank you for bringing this up to date of all these changes that are happening place on the African continent. And what I find is important is that so many countries are working together to make sure there's a harmonious approach and that they move forward strongly with respect to transformation of food systems. So thank you so much for that update. Now we have heard from our panelists, and I want to move to the audience. And Dr. Nicole De Paula, who is the technical officer of the UN Food Systems Coordination Hub, is going to assist me so that we can have some questions from the audience, and then I would refer to one or more of the panelists for remarks to these questions. So Nicole?
Yes, hi everyone, and thanks for the excellent questions, Shakuntala. As expected, we have many, so I'll try to give an overview, and I hope we can try to address them all, but most of them. just overall, a lot of people thinking for the panel is very inspiring. And for example, one of the questions here, if people were imagining highlighting the role of animals, if people could have more holistic management, I think this was addressed, but maybe a little bit in the direction of One Health. To Shenggen, many thanks as well. As you mentioned in your slide, to foster this local food system transformation, we need to be tailored to local capacities and conditions to really empower local staff. So could you please share your experience on how to operate these recommendations in practice? So the question is really on the how. I think this appears a lot as well. To Karina, I will also make a bunch here is like a little people interested in how do we balance this initiatives like meals provision in schools, especially in the least development countries, which are really now struggling with funding. So how do we, in this shrinking donor funding, how the ideas of FAO, how do we are trying to treat that in a specific moment? Also to Karina, questions on how do we deal with the turf battles between different ministries, right? Minister of Agriculture and Health. How do we really implement this multi-sector approach under SUN? Another question here, Karina saying that I'm curious about your position on quantifying hidden costs of the agri-food systems. And does your organization develop concrete policies, goals to tackle these hidden costs? Should this topic be integrated in the joining planning process for systems goals as proposed? People also question about the inclusion of private sector in this proper, I think, a very important approach. Another one, and I'm almost finishing, what kind of leadership and governance method works best to deal with political and coordination challenges? I think connects a little with the previous question. And two more, and then I'll stop. I think we will not address them all, but I'm packing them. Also, for Shenggen, if you could please share your experience. I think it's again on the operation, sorry. So final is, could the panelists elaborate on what this meaningful capacity building in system science could look like in practice? And I think the question here is like, would it be interesting to hear your thoughts on what types of skills and competence are most needed to drive the systemic change? Thank you so much, Shakuntala, and good luck to the panelists to deal with all.
Thank you so much, Nicole. So I'm not going to say this question is for this panelist, but please, from what you have told us and what you have presented, I am sure you know how to share the questions among yourselves and the answers. So what I would do now, I would first call on Shenggen, and then I would move in the same order as we had for the panelists. So I'd first call on you, Shenggen, then Karina, then Dr. Dow and Usman to give some remarks and to give some feedback to the questions. And please choose the ones that were most related to your presentation. Shenggen?
Yeah, well, first let me start with some of the challenges we're facing right now, particularly using the case of China. Because of urbanization, because of the rapid economic development, the livestock and the crop production have become very isolated. So the certain regions begin to be specialized in crop production, others are beginning to specialize in animal production, particularly by importing feed from US, from Brazil, and so on. And that has caused lots of issues, environmental issues, and even nutrition issues. People begin to eat more meat, so lots of non-communicable disease and so on. So we begin to think of what would be a new food system look like in China and in other countries, that local food system. So by local production, local consumption. Well, obviously, we do not prevent market and trade. So yes, there will be still some trade, but by and large, in a particular region, let's say like the case of China, a country, maybe 1,000 square kilometers, can we circulate all the resources there so animal produces manures, meat, and in the meantime, crop production produces feed, and so then you can recycle resources within a particular geographic region. So that also helps generate a local economy because the food will be processed locally, manures will be processed locally, and the local food services are encouraged to use local foods. But clearly, in northern part of the world, we still needed to eat tropical fruits or certain tropical, let's say, vegetables and so on. So their trade are still allowed, but by and large, we needed to circulate the local production. Now, in terms of local capacity, yes, absolutely. So I think the universities, now I'm working for university now instead of IPRI. So our job is make sure that we not only train students, but we also bring capacity to local leaders. We call, the heads of the villages, heads of the local communities. And Shukantana, you were here last year during the WAFI. We have so many of these community leaders. We work with them to build their capacity to support them, empower them with knowledge, with data, with information. So universities must change the mindset. Well, not stop, educating students. Continue to do that. But I mean, as part of the continued education or adult education, we got to focus on local communities. I'll stop over here. Thank you, Shakuntala.
Thank you so much, and it would be great if we can, when we all meet in Addis, we can take up this point also with the many universities from Africa that would come together and talk about regional collaborations between the universities. Karina, over to you.
Well, thanks for all the interesting questions. I'll pick up on a couple in particular. First, on the issue of the skills that are needed. And I think this is really important because we often talk about the hard infrastructure, the changes that need to be made in governance. But in order to do that, and in order to make the governance actually effective, you do need to have the people, as one of the people who asked the questions, the right kinds of skills and capacities and competencies. And in our work, what comes out as the single most important word is the skill of building trust. We know that there are many different perspectives in agri-food systems, and most of them are legitimate. It's not like, there's the right and the wrong. Sometimes it's tempting to see the world in black and white, but that's not what the world is, and that's not how it works. So the skill of actually building trust is really important. It's not easy. I think many of us find it difficult, but that is what has emerged as the most important skill. That does also involve the skill of surfing different perspectives and navigating conflict. So it's actually being transparent. There are differences, there are conflicts, but we can surface them and we can build trust around that. Now that's the issue because it takes time. So we are dealing with urgent problems, but the actual process of building that governance, so it actually works rather than just becoming we have a structure, we have a plan, we have all of these things in place, but to actually really drive change, it does take time to build that trust. So this is the tension between urgency plus the time that it takes. Second point, and this is relevant to that point, the question about turf wars between different sectors, whether it's at the government level. The example that the person who asked the question posed was around the scaling up nutrition work, where there's been a tremendous amount of work building multi-sectoral approaches and at country level. And this raises a question about food systems governance. Is it best to have it around one issue, to say, right, our goal is nutrition, and then we bring everything around that and achieving nutrition? Or the other alternative is to say, we bring together all of the different main objectives, which are economic, social, nutrition and health, and environmental, and work on them together as a set of shared goals. Now, the disadvantage of the latter is it can get too heavy. There's so much going on, like how can you deal with it all? What that enables is to enable where there are common solutions and shared challenges that you work on together. So then it becomes a question of identifying roles and responsibilities behind the achievement of those goals, as opposed to just focusing on one single goal. So I wonder, I don't have an answer, but what I will say is that we are doing further work at FAO on trying to unpack and this is in response to another question about actually what kinds of governance structures work and what the processes that are involved that can help them work. Final point is about the point was made about the true cost of food. The State of Food and Agriculture report in 2023 and 2024 that FAO issued was on the true cost of food. And so this is an approach very much supported by FAO. But the question is, how does that link to governance? And if you look at a country like Switzerland, where which is one of the few countries which has conducted a national true cost accounting analysis. We've seen that that was enabled because they have a joint planning process that developed a vision for agriculture, that then gave rise to a call for true cost accounting to understand what the different costs were and how they balanced across the system. So we see that the role of governance can actually be to say, okay, what is the knowledge that we need to know at the science policy interface? What is it that we need to know in order to move forward? So there's a relationship between systemic approaches to knowledge, such as true cost accounting, and systemic approaches to governance, and they intersect with each other. And what I really liked from what Usman said, from the wonderful work that's been done around CAADP, is about how you need to have all of that moving forward together. If you just focus on governance, then you're missing the other elements. And so it's really important that all of these, the action part, the governance part, the knowledge part, is seen as one. Plenty of other questions there, but I will end there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Corinne. Yeah, and I was really happy that you took up the point on trust, because we saw that with COVID. We saw from very robust studies that the countries that managed COVID best were dependent on two factors. One, trust in each other as the first, and secondly, trust in the government, in their government. So yes, it's extremely important, and I guess it's with a complex issue as transformation of food systems. Of course, trust is also very important. Usman, I turn to you. Now we are running late. I turn to Ludovico on this. We have just a few minutes left for this panel. Okay, can we go over a few minutes, or how do we manage this, Ludovica?
Ideally not.
No.
2 minutes.
2 minutes, maybe.
Why don't I let you just close, Shakuntala?
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you everyone for being in this panel. And you can hear it's a topic that has relevance for all, and for all that we are doing. We look very much forward to meeting some of you at the UNFFS stock take in Addis, and we do hope that lots of these examples and these questions and the roles of governments and how the governments are moving forward would be presented at the stock take, not only to listen, but that we can all learn from each other. Thank you so much, and thank you so much for joining us today.